I've got another story, which I could call my mother's gluten story. So my mother had full-on dementia, and you couldn't talk to her. And it was getting progressively worse over a period of maybe 5-7 years, something like that. And then I went to visit her maybe 2 years ago, and it was just, she was gone. You couldn't speak to her. She would repeat the same things over and over again. She wouldn't remember anything. It was really scary. So at that same time, I had gotten off the gluten. I had read about a connection between Alzheimer's and gluten, and I took her off gluten. My wife and I, Eliana, took her off the gluten and stayed with her for about 4 days. At the end of the 4 days, I was having a conversation with her. It wasn't 100%, but she improved incredibly. So it was hard for her too, because it was, what is gluten? Is it flour? Can I eat this? Can I eat that? Oh, I'm not going to stop eating bread, yada, yada, yada. What am I going to eat? I'm not going to have anything to eat. So we convinced her, we made a list, she put it on the refrigerator, and she stopped for a while. And I was having phone conversations with her, and she was a lot better. And then maybe about 6 weeks later, she lives up north. I'm in Miami, so that's why I didn't see her in 6 weeks. But we came back 6 weeks. I was walking through the garage to the door, and I see these pizza boxes and all this bread wrappers in the trash. I'm like, oh, she got back on the gluten. We went in there. I saw her immediately. She was pale and pasty and bloated. And I said, she's back on gluten. I was sure of it. And sure enough, she couldn't remember. So we stayed longer that time, and we made sure that she knew what gluten was, and we took her off it, and we went to the local specialty food store, and we showed her that you can buy anything and everything that you normally eat. Bread, ice cream. Believe it or not, ice cream has flour in it, has gluten in it. You have to read the labels. Pizza, pasta, everything. You can have gluten-free everything. So we did that. At the end of those 3 weeks, she was 99% back to normal. Back to normal. I mean, I tell people this, and I know they can't believe what I'm saying, but taking my mother off gluten cured her of dementia, full-on dementia, from not being able to talk to her because she couldn't remember a thing to about 99% better. It was a miracle, and it really was all about gluten. And that was, a year and a half, 2 years ago, and she's 100%. If I called her right now, she'd be fine. She'd remember everything I was saying. She'd remember what I told her last week when I talked to her. So that's amazing. So anyway, what is the coffee guy telling you about gluten for? There's no gluten in coffee. If it's 100% coffee, you don't have to worry about gluten. And don't get me wrong, I 100% want to sell you coffee, but at the same time, I really, really hope that you'll think about gluten and consider whether you're allergic to it or not, or you have celiac. But even so, what happened is they've modified grain over the years so much that it's a shell of its former self. It's unrecognizable from what it was, decades ago. And if you do some research, you'll see this graph that shows the incidences of a lot of different things. Alzheimer's, number 1, autism, number 2. For years and years and years, it was sort of a straight line like this. And then around the 80s, it hockey sticks like that. One of the things is, I'm not going to say the name of it, but one of the chemical inputs for crops that's in contention now, that was introduced at the 80s. But also the wheat getting modified was happening at that time too. So there is a correlation, and that's what it is. And so that's it. Don't get off the gluten, and we'll talk.